Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, Jodie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad. Me too. Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to ask you, how is it that you came to write your book, which is called Have You Met My Grief?
Yeah, I started sharing a lot of my experiences on social media about what was going on emotionally for me and how I was struggling with coming to terms with losing my husband to pancreatic cancer. And people said like I was quite articulate and they were learning a lot of aspects of grief that they didn't know about through what I was sharing, and I should write a book. And I guess I heard that message enough times from different sources that I decided that it was something that I should probably try. And so I did. And that's how it came about.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I was wondering if you might want to tell me a little bit about your story and your husband, Craig.
Yeah, sure. So life was pretty good. We were average couple, we were, Craig had just finished a 25-year career in hospitality, and we were preparing for another chapter of our life without shift work and rotating rosters and all that kind of stuff that goes along with working in that industry. And he was fairly fit and active and healthy, and suddenly he was experiencing a back complaint that just wouldn't go away. Like normally he would go and have some physio or a little bit of massage or some chiropractic treatment, and it would settle down and it would be better. But not on this occasion, and it just didn't seem to come good. And he went off to the GP, and she decided to send him for a CT scan, and it showed that he had pancreatic cancer, and it had metastasized to his liver. So we went with treatment, and we were told we would have months. It ended up being 37 days in total from the time he was diagnosed to the time we lost him. So it was quite aggressive and quite a very rapid deterioration in his health, and life just, as we knew it, just was over. It was a whole new existence, really. Yeah. So then,
Well, thank you.
yeah. So, and then after that, obviously, it was how grief showed up in my life and how unexpected or how unprepared I was for how that would look compared to other previous grief experiences, or losses that I'd had. Very, very different.
What were the sort of differences that you found with this particular loss compared to other grief experiences you'd had?
So I felt really sad, and I missed the people. Like it was grandparents, and I've lost a couple of friends, family members, and it was, I remember being very sad and crying a lot, and just having that ache of really missing someone. But with Craig, it was like I had a loss of identity. I started to feel like I didn't know who I was anymore, and I was having panic attacks. I was fearful to leave my house. If I did go out, I got incredibly anxious, and it was like, I have to go home. I can't be out any longer. I need to go home. And it was like, once I got home, it was like, breathe, it was just unbelievably foreign to me to have these emotions. I didn't identify as someone that was anxious and felt vulnerable and fragile and having panic attacks. And that sort of seemed to be all that I could do in those first early stages of or early days of losing him. And my brain was foggy. I was mushy. I couldn't retain information. I could sit in front of someone and listen to them or see them talking, and their mouth was moving, but I didn't hear what they were saying. And I kind of said, what did you just say? And it was just that vague, foggy feeling. I just couldn't shake it.
And what sort of help or services could you find at that time?
Yeah, I was searching for something that said this is a normal response to loss, and I couldn't find anything that sort of was saying, "Yep, you're going through a normal pattern of behaviour here or a normal reaction." And I was on social media searching and crawling through grief support groups that were on social media, and I found what I was looking for, which was some people experiencing similar things to me. And I just took a deep breath and was like, okay, I'm not going crazy, because that was a thing. I thought I was losing my mind. Okay, there are other people feeling like me. That's good. And then after a while, I started to sort of see that these groups seemed to focus on people being able to share, but there wasn't a way or anyone facilitating a way beyond that. It just felt like a dumping ground for emotions, and I kind of outgrew that quite quickly, because I felt like I'd got what I needed and I need to move on to something else that provided me with a little bit more hope. Yeah. So I went off, demanded some counselling. I just said, I can't be by myself with these intense feelings. I just don't know how to manage this. So I went off and had a session with a traditional method of counselling, and that wasn't a very good fit for me. I came out of that feeling quite distressed, worse than when I went in. I felt it ended abruptly. I didn't feel like the person listened to me. They fidgeted with everything on their desk while I was talking, and it just felt terrible. I just thought, don't have the emotional resilience to go shopping around to find somebody who can help me. If this is how I'm going to go each time, I just can't deal with it. And I ended up having a social worker from the palliative care unit that supported Craig for a few months, and that was really beneficial with strategies for coping and managing the day-to-day stuff. But after a while, we had to cease working together because he was sent back to where he's originally from, in another department, and I was still feeling very lost in all of that. Like I was back at work at that point, but I was still feeling really quite up and down with emotions and pain and not really understanding what was going on at all. And then I found the grief recovery method, and I went off and did that training and became certified to help other grievers as well, which felt like just a natural thing to do. And it gave me a lot of hope, and it gave me a lot of something to look forward to. And, it made me feel like this was something that I needed to do, not only for myself, but to help other people who are going to go through something similar to me, and maybe just fill that hole in a little bit, so not so many people fall into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about those sorts of practical kind of advice and tips and things in your book as well. I was wondering if you might be able to share a few of those things for people who are kind of on that roller coaster of grief, as you say.
Yeah, I think when I felt that anxiety start to rise up inside, I start to get worried. And I refer to anxious about getting anxious in the book, because you just, you think, if I go out, I'm going to have an anxiety attack, or I'm going to panic, or I'm going to, and you get worried about that. And it kind of, I don't know, makes it more intense, and like you've created it in a way. And I spoke to a friend about feeling like that, and she was describing to me her own health journey, and she said, like, when I go to the doctor, I just accept that I'll probably cry when I get there, because it's not a great place to go, and I'm not usually having a great experience when I'm there. But I just thought, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to go out. I might cry. I might get anxious, but I'm just going to accept it. And when I did that, like, that in itself took the weight out of the anxiety a little bit. Like, it became a little bit more like I was in control, and it did kind of help manage that. And I found that I didn't feel quite so controlled by that. I felt like I had regained some of that back. And I think once I learned to surrender to the waves of emotion, whether it be tears, whether it be a little bit of an anxious moment, or a sadness, you know, I'd speak and I'd suddenly, a lump would appear in my throat and tears would just be pricking my eyes, and I'd, you know, it just comes out of nowhere, and you have no control over it. But once you kind of accept that this is how it is for now, I think it does allow you to kind of function within that. And I just kind of said to people, look, I'm okay with it. Are you okay with it? If you can be okay with it, we're all good. But I think it also exposes people to what you're going through. And if we do shy away and run away from it and go and hide ourselves, like, we're not really teaching people how to be around it or in it, and doing them a huge disservice, I think, because it is an uncomfortable thing to talk about. It's an uncomfortable topic. It's an uncomfortable place to sit sometimes, but so is actually being the person who is grieving. It's pretty uncomfortable too. Yeah.
And that is something that you talk about as well, is that uncomfortableness and sort of awkwardness that people around you, both while Craig was having treatment and also you know, when you're going through your own grief, that people felt sort of uncomfortable around you or wasn't sure what to say, and sometimes say unhelpful things. So I guess, what are kind of some of the common things that people do that are less helpful, and what can we do to be better for people to support them in their, you know, in their treatment or in, you know, difficult illnesses or when they're grieving?
I think you know, it's the programming that we've grown up with. We hear other people say things to people who have lost someone or have lost their job, or maybe a pet's died, or, you know, whatever the experience is. And people will say, oh, you know, the stock standard kind of things that I'm sure we've all heard at some point. And one of those might be, well, they had a good innings, or at least they're in a better place, or at least they're not in pain anymore. And I think those at least comments are really, really tricky ones, because they imply that there's some sort of silver lining, I think. And it sounds like you're offering comfort, but when you hear it from the perspective of, I've just lost somebody I really care about, there's no silver lining for me. At least they're in a better place. Well, according to who? Like, because I believe my husband should be here with me, as many other women who I spoke to when I wrote my book, they felt the same way. And I think unless the person who's going through that situation says to you, like, my honest belief and my emotional truth is that this person is in a better place, or whatever it is, I think it's up to them to be able to express that. It's not up to other people to tell them how they should feel, or what your perception of their situation might be. Sometimes people will say things like, you've just got to be strong, you've just got to get through it, and you've just got to, you know, one foot in front of the other. And especially to other family members too. Like, my 19-year-old son was told he had to be strong for me, and he's experiencing his own loss. He's grieving his own loss of someone he looked up to and saw very much as a father figure. He was Craig's stepfather, but they had a very good relationship. So asking him to be strong for me was really a pretty hard thing to ask a 19-year-old to do. And I'd say, look, he doesn't have to be. None of us have to be strong. We just have to feel what we're going to feel. Like, it's, no one's feeling anything less, more, or worse, or better than anyone else. We're all experiencing this together. And I think sometimes people with a who have a religious aspect or a connection, or they have a relationship with God, may impose that on somebody who may not share those beliefs, and that can be a really tricky area as well. So you know, it may seem comforting and helpful at the time, but you might be talking to someone who's struggling with their relationship with God, if they have one, because of what's happened, or they may not have that same belief system, and it's something that, you know, doesn't necessarily apply across the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how can we sort of better support those people in our lives?
I think something that I learned was just basically being really honest and saying, I don't know what to say. I don't know how you're feeling. I can't imagine how you must be feeling, because when we experience loss, we know how we felt at the time, but we don't know how that how the person in front of us is feeling. They may have had a really complicated relationship, and there are a lot of mixed feelings about the situation. And not everyone has a loving, nurturing, supportive relationship. Some relationships can be very complicated and volatile and you know, really different. But there's still grief associated with a loss of any kind. So just being aware that not everyone will grieve the same way and have the same feelings. I think it's important to just listen when somebody's telling you how they're feeling without judgment, because they may be really angry at the way that the person has passed away, or see that they've left them. They might just say, you've left me here to deal with all this stuff, and, you know, I'm really cross at you, but I'm also sad, and I'm also missing you, and I'm also scared, and I'm a whole range of things. So being able to express that and not have someone passing judgment on the way they're feeling, because that might be how they feel today. Tomorrow could be completely different. So just letting them process those feelings and thoughts and emotions, and sometimes just showing up and sitting with them, or saying, do you want to go for a walk this afternoon? Or, you know, said, can I take the kids to school for you today? If it's somebody who is a young mum or has young children, or it might be offering to do some gardening or something around the house that needs to be done, just so that they don't feel so overwhelmed with everything that they have to now take on.
Yeah. And I guess I also wanted to ask, you mentioned as well about this idea of moving forward rather than moving on, and sort of creating a new normal. And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was something that really struck a chord for me when I was looking for ways of making sense of my new normal, I guess. And I saw this TED talk by Nora McInerney, who talks about her own story, and it's really an amazing story. And she shared the moving on versus moving forward. We don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. And it just sat and aligned with me nicely, because it's sort of moving on implies, well, that happened, we shut the door on it, we pack up, we get on with it, and we just, you know, pretend like it never happened, or do our best to kind of put it behind us. Whereas, you know, I was shaped by Craig, you know, like our relationship shaped the person that I became. So I don't see that he's something that I want to sort of cut out from my life and forget about. So for me to move forward carrying him with me, like he continues to shape the person I become, like the decisions I'm making, the choices that I have, I kind of check in and say, well, what would he be thinking about that? Or what would he say about that? And I think the relationship we have with our loss, like it's also about, comes down to something that I spoke with my social worker, which was called continuing bonds, which was about recognizing that the relationship has changed, but it doesn't have to end. And if you can have a connection to your person in a positive way that allows you to honor that memory or commemorate that in some way. So some people may go out and get a tattoo. All right, it's like a commemorative tattoo or something like that. And some people might plant trees. Some people might decide to take up a hobby or a sport that they like golf or something like that, as a way of staying connected. It doesn't really matter how you choose to do that. It's going to be very individual for every person. And I think it's one of those things that is, there's no right or wrong. It's just what's right and what gives you a sense of connection and positive connection to your loss. And that's sort of helps with that moving forward as well. Yeah. Does that sort of explain what you...
sort of, I guess, a little bit... Yeah, I think so. I think, and the related to that idea of sort of moving forward and creating this new normal, it's sort of when you were talking about, you know, there may be all these new things that you have to pick up because the person, you know, used to do them with you, or so how do you kind of construct that in your everyday life, and what are some of the you know, advice or tips that you have for people to kind of deal with those things that you know, maybe didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, like I think I mentioned in the book, it's learning to fly while you're building the plane, really. It's there's not a hard and fast rule about how to do it, but you know, getting overwhelmed with all the things that they just seem to do effortlessly. Like Craig he'd just go and do the handyman stuff. Like if something needed fixing, you know, the drill would come out, you'd hear him banging hammer and nails or whatever, and something would be fixed. And now it's like, who's going to do that? So, you know, finding friends that are handyman or, you know, useful with some tools, or you just go, do you know how I can fix this thing? Or the gate's swinging open, I can't get it to shut, or whatever. So, yeah, those sorts of things can be really... They're little things, I think, in regard, like, it, you know, to some people that might sound like a really, really little thing, but if you've never had to do that stuff before and suddenly you're like, the person who would fix that's gone, now how do I, you know, it can be really overwhelming and really, really hard to ask for help sometimes. So that's what I was saying before about, you know, if you see something when you're visiting a grieving person and you see like there's a gate that's not quite working properly, or taps are dripping, or there's something that you think, well, you know what, I could actually fix that, or I know someone who knows a guy who can do that. So you can kind of, you know, offer to help out with those sorts of things. I think it does get down to, like, you know, if like just getting used to picking up the slack a bit. Like, you know, there's not two of you kind of reminding each other the bins have to go out tonight. You've kind of got to remember that all on your own. And it can be a bit of a struggle getting used to that stuff. But, you know, I think that's, you know, friends and family being there and just helping out in those early days, the early weeks, months is really, really important for helping you just adjust through that. Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on that sort of friends and family idea already, but I kind of wanted to ask and kind of go back to your experience with Craig when you were going through treatment and people weren't really sure how to act or how to be helpful or support you. And I, you know, if you have any advice for those, you know, friends and family who might feel a bit unsure of what the best way to help is.
Yeah, I think I think with well, there's two parts to that question, because I think, like, one aspect with Craig's illness, we chose not to tell people the nature of his cancer and the stage of cancer that he had, because and do you want me to talk about that now, or do you want to come back to that with boundaries?
No, sure. I'm happy for you to talk about that. I think the boundaries part of it and dealing with helping people and is really important.
So, yeah. Okay, so I'll talk about that and then sort of how the friends and family kind of come into it a bit, I think, because Craig's a very private person, so he was sort of like, oh, we don't, you know, I don't need people knowing everything about what's going on. But it was also like, well, if we tell people that you're sick, like, people are going to want to know what's wrong. You know, there's going to be all these questions. And I was working as, like, doing fitness classes, so I couldn't just cancel on work and say, look, I'm not coming today. I'm sick, or this has happened, or something's happened, it's going to get tiresome. People are going to be like, well, you're being really unreliable, where we need you to be here. What's going on? So we told part of the truth, which was Craig had cancer and I had to be available to take him off for treatment and appointments and things like that. So that meant people were a bit more respectful and understanding of the need to change times. And if he was sick, for example, and I just said, look, I'm not coming in today, I can't do it. It didn't really create too much concern for people. They were accepting of it. But of course, people said, well, what type of cancer and what stage is it and that kind of thing. I said, well, we don't need to know that. And that was largely because we knew what we were dealing with, and we didn't need other people coming back to us with their Google stories and their personal accounts of experiences that they may have had with someone going through their own cancer journey, which was unhelpful to our situation. We had to run our own race. So we didn't want to be slammed with all this other stuff, trying to make sense of our situation and then have all this other pressure, I guess, that we were under other people's expectation, or I guess their way of coping might have been different to ours. So we had some boundaries around what people found out, what they knew, what we put out there, and then told only close friends and family what was going on. So they were available to help out. They would come and visit. And when Craig was in hospital, they would come and visit him and see him in hospital and sit with him, and offered, helped with getting the kids, like the boys, to and from hospital, picked my mum up from the airport, stuff like that. It was really, really helpful to have that, support with that. And then later on, after Craig had passed away, I had a lot of people asking me, to go. They'd come and have meals with me, or they would drop pots of soup off. I had a lot of support from people, just looking out for me and my two boys as well, and that was really helpful. My friends were pretty good at hanging out in my grief and being really uncomfortable about that. One of my friends, she made me smile, because I invited them over one night and said, look, just be prepared for the roller coaster you're about to ride, because I'm all over the place. And she's like, oh my God, I love roller coasters, count me in. And it was just a really, perfect response, because it was like, oh, well, I can accept that this is what's going to happen. And we just deal with the emotions as they came, So I was pretty blessed with some great friends. Yeah.
Oh, that's really lovely. And I wanted to sort of talk to you about your sort of work as a grief recovery specialist as well. You said you'd been training in that, and you sort of have been helping a lot of people deal with their grief. And how do you sort of stay motivated and continue to do that work?
Yeah, it's like I said, finding something that was life-changing for me, it makes sense that you want to share that for other people. Like, I was pretty broken. Like, I still have friends say to me now, like, I just can't, believe that you are the same person. After Craig died, they just said they just couldn't believe how broken I was. They've just never seen me so low. And to be able to get to a place where I can function again, and that I'm, not just surviving now, I am working towards rebuilding life and moving forward, is testament to the work that I've done to heal from that. And look, it's not like you just do a 6 or 7 week session program where you just one session a week for 6 or 7 weeks and then bang, that's it. Grief recovery is an ongoing process, because the relationship continues, right? So there's always a birthday or a Christmas or an anniversary that comes around each year, and your relationship with your loss is, around those times can be tested, like can be bring up those emotions. And I guess it's a time to reevaluate where you're at and to be able to look in and assess, well, what am I feeling about this, and my feelings now are very different to what they were back then. Like, it was very painful, whereas now, like, I have quite happy, fond memories of things that happen, and I may have an emotional response, but it doesn't mean it's a sad one. It's just an emotional response to a memory or an association to a song that I hear, that I now kind of go, oh yeah, and I might have a tear or two, but it's not a painful thing. It's not necessarily sad. So working through those emotions and being able to process them in a way that allows you to move beyond the pain of loss, but still keeps you connected to your person. It's not like you forget them. It's not like you ever will forget that. You carry this with you for the rest of your life, but it does help you have a relationship based on more positive connection rather than a painful connection. Because sometimes when we lose someone, it is painful, and pain is pain. Pain is not love. It's not, it's pain. And being able to be connected to your loved one in a much more loving space is a lot nicer place to be in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, if people are sort of experiencing grief or they want to talk to somebody, how can they get in touch with you? And or if there are other sort of avenues that people want to go down, what are sort of the places you suggest?
Yeah, look, I love what I do, and I recommend it. Like, I would, but saying that, I respect that each individual is going to have their own ideas about what they need for themselves, and I respect that. Some people will turn to faith or religion, and that will be their way of managing their situation. Some people will want to go down traditional modes of therapy and maybe do counselling or grief counselling, or go to bereavement counselling groups, things like that. And then there's grief recovery, which is the grief recovery method, which is, dealing with the emotional business that comes from loss and really tapping into the heart and the emotions rather than intellectualizing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that we are doing, and providing strategies around how to manage it. Because that's all well and good. And my book is very much focused on strategies and coping mechanisms and tips for getting through the day. But it gets to a point where you don't want to just manage. You don't want to just get through the day. You think, at some point, I want to feel like I'm living again. I want to feel like I'm actually not just getting out of bed, going through the motions, and getting back into bed at the end of the day. It's there is about dealing with those emotional aspects of loss and undelivered communication, and dealing with the unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations of a life that has changed. And they can be heavy rocks to carry around. So it's learning how to deliver that and work through that. So if people want to work with me, I'm available. I'm at Jodie-Atkinson.com.au. So there's a dash between my name and my surname. And I've got, in the back of my book, I've got all my my website and my Facebook contact information. If people want to have a chat with me about what that looks like, because it is an experiential program. I can't tell you that you're going to feel this and you're going to have this happen and this is going to happen, because everyone will interact with the program in their own way based on their own unique relationship to their loss. So it's specific in that it helps you to deal with the stuff that you need to deal with for your situation.
Mm-hmm. And I'll make sure that we link to those as well. And I just wanted, to say thank you, and also ask if there was anything else that you wanted to tell me about or talk about, or you think that is important to mention.
I think one of the things that I reflect on is the decision that we made to not not to tell people too much about our story. I think boundary setting, I didn't think of it as boundary setting at the time. I didn't see it that way. It was just like, I just need to protect us, protect him, protect myself, protect my family from, outside horror stories and people's opinions and views and all of that. And I think just because somebody has an illness or a terminal illness diagnosis doesn't mean that it needs to be shared with every person that you come in contact with, and opening yourself up for, oh, well, there's great treatments here and there's this over here. And that is true. There are great treatments and there are advancements and there are clinical studies and trials and all of that. But sometimes your situation may not apply to those things. And it's really hard to have those positive kind of hang in there, you can beat this type of cancer discussions when you know that your person is facing a very low rate of success in terms of the stats that we know with pancreatic cancer. But at the same time, you don't want to be all doom and gloom about that either. So it is a tricky one to navigate. So I think sometimes being on message with what you're prepared to share and who you're prepared to share it with, and even in your grief as well, like having conversations like, what are you going to do now? You're going to stay in your house? When are you going to go back to work? Can you do that? You think, whoa, I don't even know what day it is. I don't even, please don't come at me with those questions. I can't deal with getting out of bed today, let alone what I'm going to be doing next week. So, really managing, having boundaries and having people in your corner that you can say, can you please deal with that person, or can you deal with this aspect of paperwork that I've got to work through. It makes such a difference to the emotional stress and the ability to function through those things, and managing your own level of anxiety on each day, when you've got someone who you can sort of say, I need help going through these things today.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a really good thing to implement if you can. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you don't really may not be in the headspace to be functioning that way, but I think by talking about it, I think that's another thing I would like to see come out of my book, is that conversations are being had. People are talking to their loved ones, their families, their friends about, how grief can show up, because not everybody will just slink off to a corner and cry quietly and then come back when they feel like they can engage with life again. Some people need people around them. Some people will not cry. Some people may laugh and get angry. Some people may cry, laugh, get angry all in the space of 5 minutes. It's really, it looks different all the time. And a grieving person can have friends over and be laughing and having fun, and then at the next minute suddenly be completely overwhelmed with tears and crying, and it is so unpredictable. But if we know how it can show up and we are somewhat prepared for it, we can perhaps make it a little less uncomfortable for people to be around.
Yeah, and have those conversations.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Jodie. I really, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for talking about your experiences and all of the help that you give other people.
Thank you for the opportunity. And it's like I've just I don't know whether you want me to hold a copy of the book up, like
sure, yeah,
just so people can see that. So I can get that in the camera there.
Beautiful.
So that's what my book looks like. So blue butterflies, to Craig's favorite color was blue, and butterflies obviously have a lot of significance in the transformation process, but also I planted a blue butterfly bush in memory of him, and also the whether people believe it or not, the spirit messengers from the other side too. There's a lot of layers to the cover. So
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know that story. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jodie. I really appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely.